Um, Pierre, one thing we notice in recent years is the increasing number of single-parent families, which often leads to an increased demand on people to fill a grandfather role in a much more committed and substantive way than in the past. You've been very involved with your grandson, Tomas, in the last 3 to 4 years. From your experience, I'm sure there's many pros. There must be certainly a few cons. What sort of advice might you have for somebody who's contemplating taking up that kind of a role? And how has your experience been?
Well, my experience has been great. It's with all due respect to your favorite pastime, I think grandfathering beats playing golf any time. You know. But just explain to me. You're right. In the last, I guess, we have a grandson who's going to be 4 next week, in fact, and my wife and I have been basically looking after him since my daughter went back to work after 6 or 7 months of maternity leave. So I guess it's over 3 years, 3.5 years that we've been looking after him pretty well on a full-time basis. She drops him off on her way to work at about 8:30 in the morning and picks him up about 6:30 in the evening. And we've had him since he was, I guess, 8 or 9 months old. And it's been a great experience. But it does, it's not for everybody. I can see that. We've learned an awful lot from it. It's changed our whole retirement lifestyle, as you can well imagine. But, and there's, I guess in that sense, a lot of people see that as entailing certain kinds of costs. But I've noticed that, yeah, there do seem to be more, I seem to be more aware, at least, of grandparents who are taking on this larger role these days than, say, 30 or 40 years ago, or maybe I just wasn't aware of it. But, you know, I always thought of grandparents, you know, that they sort of appeared at Sunday dinner every few weekends, or Thanksgiving or Christmas, maybe, you know, a week at the cottage or something like that with the grandchildren. And I seem to notice more grandparents heavily engaged with their grandchildren these days. I mean, I see it when I take young Thomas to the park, for example. You know, there'll be a motley crew there. I mean, there'll be 3 or 4 nannies, Filipino nannies, a couple of young mothers who just often got a babe in arms and a 3 or 4-year-old playing in the park, and 2 or 3 grandparents who are there with the grandchildren. And we get all chatting and talking and find out a bit more about it. As I say, I don't know how common it is, but it certainly seems to me, I seem to be seeing more of it than I did 30 years ago. And maybe I just wasn't aware of it because I was caught up with parenting 30 years ago.
I mean, certainly with my grandparents, it was Sunday lunch after church.
Yeah, like that. Well, as I said, it's great, and it does seem to be on the increase. Some factors is fathers or mothers who are trying to cope with a job, with the normal social life of a young adult, and with 1 or 2 or 3 children at the same time, and the grandparents, if they're available, pitch in and give a hand. I said not everybody is able to do it on as extensive a basis as we do, but I think you see more of it than just the occasional weekend visit. I think it's a very good thing because we saw a lot of the disintegration from about the 40s onwards, 40s and 50s onwards of the larger family that we saw, the traditional one of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and then it sort of shrinking into a nuclear family. And part of that is, children grow and they move off someplace. One's living in Vancouver, living in Halifax, somebody working overseas, and families didn't get together as much. So there were reasons for that, but with the increased involvement of grandparents seems to be a little bit of an expansion of that nuclear family, and I think that's a good thing.
Yep.
One of the things that the real advantages, if you look at the advantage of the child and the grandparent, one of them is just that sense of roots. We live in a real whirligig world, where people are moving, events are changing, and the sense of past and of tradition and a lot of the social rituals that went with that are being lost. And grandparents provide that link with the past that's really important for anyone's sense of identity. The grandparents get to spend time with the grandchild, and they talk about growing up, about what it was like, explain to them what a typewriter was and things like that.
Yeah.
I grew up without grandparents. My father's family was in Europe, and my mother's family, her parents died when I was just a little child. I was too young to remember them. And I really sense now, and began to sense later on in my life, not at first, that I was really missing something by not knowing about what life was like for my parents or my parents' parents, where we came from, that kind of thing. So Thomas certainly gets lots of that, as he listens to me rambling on and on about things. So that's one thing that's really important. It gives a child a sense of roots, of context, and I think that gives the child an additional sense of security, which is really important for him as he grows. Obviously, he also gets the security that comes from the kind of unqualified, unconditional love that a grandparent is able to give. The parent loves the child, obviously, most intensely of all. But, the father and the mother have got running the house, they've got paying the bills, they've got, the jobs usually for both of them. And they've got the fact that they are the ones really that are the primary teachers and structurers of the life of the child. The discipline comes from the parents. Grandparents don't really have to take on that stuff, so the child isn't dealing with them as someone who's my loving mommy and daddy, but also the one that tells me, go to bed, do this, do that. Grandparents can deal with the child on a much simpler, more straightforward level. And as a result, it's an unqualified relationship. And they get that love from the grandparents. And often the grandparents are able to give more of that love and affection and warmth to their grandchild than often they were able to do with their own children.
Yeah.
Because it was like with my children. Woke up in the morning, was rush, get breakfast, get them their clothes, off to school, and then off to work before they went to school. And then we got home at 6:30, it was supper time, and a little bit of chit-chat, do your homework. We were both exhausted, and the next thing you know, you want to get the child to bed, or as they got a little bit older, they were off with their friends after school or in the evening. With grandparents, there's particularly at an early age, you've got the ability to give them the time that you didn't have when you were a regular parent with your own children.